welcome to Elisabeth Hogarth Designs. Today we're going to be looking at a beautiful mini album complete with tags and small cards that I have created using the beautiful Portrait of a Lady from Graphic 45. Let me begin by showing you the products that I'm going to be using today. The mini album is based on this particular cream version that I've got from Graphic 45. So you've got pockets. There are also 4 tags that come with this, but I've added some extra ones. So I'll leave you the link for this particular small album with tags. I've got some of the later stamps that will be the main focus for the background pages, and with those stamps I'm going to be using the Acorn VersaFine Clair because I want to use the deep brown. I'm only going to use one colour ink for all of the backgrounds because it adds some cohesion to the papers. I'm then going to bring in the Peachy Pink and the Fabulous Natural Linen, which are in the Graphic 45 hybrid ink range, and these work really well for blending the sides, adding a vintage look. You can use it on your embellishments. They do stamp as well, but I wanted to have the deeper brown as well. So here are the range of the colours. So we're using the Peachy Pink and the Natural Linen, but you've also got the lovely lilac, the marine blue, the classic black. I'm also going to be using a few of the Portrait of a Lady papers and some of the smaller journaling cards for the tags. But you can see they're really beautiful papers. They are exemplary in their design. So I'm going to be quite frugal with this one because it's a small album, but I do want to incorporate the colour palette because I've got the linen here and the Peachy Pink. So this will be used for the cover and a few areas of the album. And I may well bring in some of the stickers that are included in this collector's edition because they will work really well for additional embellishment. Generally, when I'm creating these albums, I prefer to decorate the inside and then I know the design of the front cover, but I want to make sure that I've got a couple of buttons secure in place before I go ahead and decorate the inside. So I'm going to turn on my glue gun so that it's nice and hot, and then we'll look at the front cover. So I've got 4 sheets of the Portrait of a Lady paper, and 2 of them will go on the outside, and then I've got one of the smaller journaling cards cut down with the corners trimmed, and I'm going to add some ink using the blending brushes that I've used for this project. So these are fairly straightforward stenciling brushes, but they work well, and I keep them on the ring for transporting them around when I'm using the project. So I do this in stages where I'll take some of the papers downstairs and then I will ink the edges in preparation. So I prefer to prep everything before I film something like this, because otherwise all you're going to see is me cutting and sticking, and I would rather show you the design. So I'm just using the linen to draw in the edges. I have also done this with the marker pens before and also with the blending inks, but I want this to be quite a light effect, and these stencil brushes are everywhere at the moment, so they're pretty easy to get hold of. On the stamped images, I will end up using a blend of the Peachy Pink and the linen. but for the front cover I'm quite happy just to stick with the natural linen. I've got 2 more pieces measuring 4 by 4 7/8, which gives me a nice border on the album, and then all of these will coordinate together. So you could use these as sides, but it's quite therapeutic when you're inking all of these up, especially when you've got quite a few to do in one go. And when I'm crafting by myself, I'll sit down and I'll take my time with this, but I film in another room now, so I'm standing up as I work, so hopefully you can see the details on screen. I'm also going to add just a touch of ink to the corners of the album itself. And then it's a matter of adding glue I'll quickly show you how I cut this out. So I folded a piece of scrap paper in half and I slid it underneath this clasp here, and I drew a pencil line around it and cut away until I had a template. I then cut a piece of coordinating paper which is 2 inches by the same height, 4 7/8, and then I used the pencil line to cut away my template, and that gave me this piece here that I'm going to stick in place. Before I add the main lady to the front, I'm going to create 2 buttons that I've taken from the ephemera, and I'm going to run some cord through it, and then these will be the pieces where I tie up the album itself. So I want these in place so that they can dry. So I've got some twine. I thought the lilac would work quite well with the colours as well. I'm going to take away the main part of the button in here to give me plenty of threading space. So I want the twine to come from the bottom and come through the top, and then I will seal this with the hot glue. Make it roughly the same length. So plenty of thread, and then I'm going to attach these in place like so. We'll add a thin strip of foam tape just to give the young lady a little bit of dimension, and it may well be that I come back and I add some more ephemera, but I want the main piece drying while I get on and I stamp the background. So when I remember, I try and add some extra glue to give me wiggle room, and also some of these foam tapes have a tendency to dry out, so you want this to be long lasting. So we're going to add the button to this side. We want the young lady to come slightly over this way, and as I say, I will probably end up adding some more ephemera in place. I want the buttons to be round about in the same position, so I'm going to measure 2 inches from the top. I'll just keep that in place. I'm going to use my glue, and I'm going to be generous with it because I want to seal that thread in place. And then we will pop that onto the edge here so that the top just hits the ruler. So that's holding in place. You can use a heat tool to take away any strings of glue after it's all dried. So I'll press that down securely. So then we'll turn it around and do the same at the other end. So I've built up a good range of stamps from the newer collection. So this is Let It Be and Little Things. And the nice thing about this, that many of these will coordinate, and you can use a mix of the text with the tags. There's butterflies, there's flowers, everything will work together. So rather than just keeping them to only go with the set, I wanted to show that you can use these as backgrounds for the albums. So when you run out of paper, you can still work with the designs. I particularly like this stamp collection, the sentiment stamps, because you've got something for every day. But the real heroes are these tiny stamps, because you can make borders with them and you can add extra embellishments to the card. I'm using standard ivory cream. It is card, but I went for it to slightly offset the album itself. White would be too harsh, but you can of course use your preferred colour. This is a cardstock. It's matte. It's round about 200 GSM. It's pretty good quality. It's not particularly smooth, but it works for this project. So I cut myself 16 of these, measuring 3 3/8 by 4 3/8, and then I'm going to use most of them with a pattern on one side and then a sentiment on the other, with some of those worker stamps on the outside. The butterflies in the flower market work really well for backgrounds. You can colour them, but I'm going for just one colour, which is the VersaFine Clair Acorn. And all I'm going to do is add the stamp to a small block, and we're going to cover the cream area by, I don't know whether it's really true, but I tend to go in 3. So I keep the pattern in the upright position because you do want to see the design. I add the ink to my block, and then I'll turn the butterfly slightly so that we've got 3 main images, like so. But then I will turn my stamp, add the ink again. You can work quite quickly with this, and then I'm going to, because butterflies don't fly in the same direction, and then you want to leave yourself plenty of cream or white space, because then that will draw your eye around, and it doesn't matter how large the piece of paper is or the card. I mean, this is quite a small area, but I'm going to turn it again, and I'm going off the page, so I've got round about the same amount of clear space. I'm going off the paper, and then I need to have one part here just to bring that in so that your eye runs downwards. So let's go slightly at an angle. I'm going to go off the paper again. Take your time when you're stamping. It's not a matter of just pulling it up as quickly as you can. Now we're just going to bring in some slight angles. Let's move this one out of the way. I just want to add a tiny little bit of a wing here. And I've still got ink on my block, so I'm just going to come in here and just a tiny bit here, because you're imagining that the pattern is working on a bigger space, so you've still got the same amount of gap in between or space in between, but that's how you would create a really simple pattern. I mentioned that I wanted to bring in this colour palette, so this ties in beautifully with the peachy pink and the natural linen. So this is going to be my colour theme here. So we've already used that linen on the front of the album, so I'm going to bring in the stencil brushes again. And really, you don't want a lot of ink, but we're going with the peachy pink. We're just going to bring in some colour to the piece of card itself. This is a blending mat. When I'm working on my desk in my craft space, then I'll use my glass mat, but I find it easier to go clockwise and anti-clockwise just to bring the colour in. You really don't need to add a lot of ink to the brush. This also works with the ink blenders, but the egg ink blenders, but you might find that the colour's a little bit heavy, so I wanted this to be a little bit more subtle. And then because I don't just want that pure pink, I'm going to bring in the natural linen again. I'm aware that there are many experienced crafters who have seen this done over and over again, but it's always worth showing the way that you work, because you never know, you might pick up something new. And I just like the way that the colours blend here, and then in a way I am complementing the graphic 45 papers. The stamps are good workhorses because you can use them even when the papers have run out, and generally they are very good value for money, so you can create your own designs with very minimal expense. Now I curve the corners afterwards, because then if I've come in at the edge here and it's a little bit bold, then I can cut away and I've still got enough colour on the card itself. So that's the pattern, and then we're going to do the same again, but this time with the text. I'm going to work with the Earth Laughs in Flowers, and I'm going to imagine that's going to be in the centre of my card here, and then that will give you an area to write if you want to. You can also turn these into journaling tags. So we'll just add some ink to this, and then we're going to go in with the Versifying Clair again. So you only need one ink colour for this project. Try and keep the piece straight, and then they're good quality stamps, so you can just lay them down Give it a moment to connect with the paper. Don't move your block, just gently tap your fingers across and then boldly lift up. And you've got yourself a lovely sentiment on your card there. Pop this back in place. So any of these would work well together. But then I also want to bring in some of these borders here. So this time we'll go with this arrow effect. So I'm going to use the block. I've got some lines on my block. Just going to place that down. Make sure that it's straight. And then add another smaller stamp just to balance it out, because these lines are quite narrow. But then this particular time I take the stamp to the block so that I'm not flooding it with ink. Let's give it a little tap. You don't want to press on this too much because it's a thin line and you don't want it to splodge out. But there we have your earth laughs in flowers. And then this time I'm not going to add any ink at all. I want this to be quite a delicate border of colour. I'm going to go in with the pink, not adding any additional ink at all. And then we'll go in with the linen. Just keep turning it clockwise and anti-clockwise. The brush at this stage is quite flat on the surface, so it's literally horizontal to the paper. Quite often when you're blending, you'll go in at an angle, but with this particular style of brush, it's a matter of going in horizontally to the card, and then you'll get a nice blended effect. There we go. And then we'll take away the corners again on the 1/4 inch. It's just a nice way to make your own cards and backgrounds, like so. I lost some of my filming, so I'll show you the designs as I decorate the pages, but they've all essentially been made in the same way with the stamps that I've got available to me. And then I use these worker stamps to give me the borders and the little additional embellishments here. And every one of the pages has been inked in the same way, so I've kept to the same colour scheme because I want it to blend with the portrait of a lady. But it's a really nice way of making a personalised set of background papers. So I'll speed the filming up a little bit, but you'll still be able to see the general idea of how I have decorated each one of these pages. So the decorative cards will go on the main plain pages, and then I'll come back and I'll add some of the portrait of a lady papers to this part, and then I'll show you how I've decorated the tags. So there are the backgrounds that we have inked, and they're all in place. Now I'm going to come back in and I'm going to add some of the printed paper from Portrait of a Lady to blend in with the pockets here. So these measure 3 3/8 by 1 3/8. So I've inked the edges again just to save a little bit of time. So I'm going to add the same patterned paper to each one of these pockets, and then we'll bring in the tags. Within this mini album, I had 4 tags inside the pockets, but I collect the Graphic 45 smaller tags, so they are exactly the same. So I added 4 from my own collection, so I'm going to end up with 8 tags. So because I wanted a slight border, I used the Graphic 45 square clock dies, and within that set, one of the smaller dies fits perfectly with the cream, and it will give you a slight border, and I really like that attention to detail. You can of course cut these directly and then use them as they are. So I kept the design simple. I've used 1 strip of paper and I have cut the patterns in the pink, so these will go on the front, and then I use the same strips of paper. I've been really frugal with this collection because there's so much that you can do with it, and these match the inside cover, and then these will be stuck, and then you can use the back. You can add stamps to it. They can be used any way you like, so they can be used for journaling, or you could use it as a gift set, because in a moment I'm going to show you some cards that I've added to the pocket. So I'll stick these together and pop them in the pockets at the front and the back. So for these cards, I used these smaller sections. So I spent some time cutting down these elements. These I ended up using for something else. But there's a second page with some larger journaling cards and the smaller ones here. So it's a collector's edition. So I had the stickers, I had the chipboard, and then I had the 12 by 12 papers. So there's a lot to work with, and as you can see, I've used minimal amounts so far. So I took some more of the ivory card, and this is 3 1/8 by 8 1/4, and then they are folded in half. And these will fit inside those pockets. So you want 4 of these, and then the corners are added in, and then I'm going to stick the journaling cards to the front, and then I've already pre-stamped using the same sentiments the inside, so I'll show you as I put them together. So overnight I made some changes to this little project. I came back to it. I wasn't particularly thrilled by the twine, so I razored off the buttons and took out the twine, and then re-glued it with some of the Graphic 45 ivory ribbon. I made a bigger image here because I didn't feel that it really stood out on the front of the album. So I cut out the same lady in a bigger design, and then I've added some glossy accents to make a pendant style topper. We've added some roses, a few brass knickknacks, and then I've added more to the front and replaced the button at the back. The other thing that I did was I wanted to decorate the back of the pages here, because when I came back to the cream, this felt quite bland in comparison to everything else. So again, I kept the same paper design and then cut myself a small piece to fit into the album here. So we've gone for the sort of olive green and the pink, and you can see that it really does finish off the album. I added a few little bits of sticky tape with the sentiments and the roses on, and you can see that you've got a really personal little album here. So there we have the Portrait of a Lady mini album, and in addition I've made a gift bag that I will show you really quickly. So here's the bag, and I've made it wide enough to fit the album complete with the embellishments, because that's important. You don't want them knocking out of the way. And then the height of it is just about big enough so that you've got a wide enough base as well. So believe it or not, this starts off life as 2 A4 sheets of paper or cardstock, and then you'll see that that fits snugly inside. So there's design number 1, and then there's design number 2. So if you want to know more, take a look at the Graphic 45 blog. So there we have the finished mini album, complete with the stamp backgrounds and coordinating tags. You've got a bag to hold it in. I think Portrait of a Lady is a really classic and stunning collection to work with. I particularly like that there are women of colour depicted in the images, so there's a lot to be working with. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this collection, and don't forget to check out the official Graphic 45 blog if you want to know how to make the bag. And I look forward to welcoming you back to Elisabeth Hogarth Designs very, very soon. Take care. Bye bye for now.